Welcome to the podcast with myself, Benjamin Owen, and Karen Bramhill. How are you doing, Karen?
I'm excellent, having a beautiful day so far.
I'm excited to have this conversation because Karen and I have been working side by side on a venture that she's created in line with her life's work. And I love what you said before, Karen. It's not that you need a new life, you need a new lens. Talk to me just to begin with about that.
Sure. And thanks for having this conversation with me. I'd love to talk about this. The idea behind having a new lens is being able to figure out how we walk through life. So I think in a previous life, before I became a coach, before I tapped into my creativity, I was walking through very linearly, very much checking the box, going forward, one step at a time, really in my left brain, really just, this is what I was told to do. So I'm going to keep walking forward. When I became a coach, and as you know, that is a whole new lens that you can't unsee. You become a coach and you have a new way of walking through the world. You think about things more openly, you think about possibilities. And I had that experience about 10 years ago when I refound my way into creativity. I was going down a path where I felt really lost. I felt really disconnected. I didn't know what I even liked. I didn't know anything about myself. And I started to explore what it is I used to like to do. And painting was something that I liked to do. So I tapped into this really creativity in me, which sparked something, which became a spark, which was a spark and then became a fire. And really what that means is being able to see things more openly, see things more innovatively, see things through a lens that really tapped into an inner knowing. And I started to then walk through life with that new lens of creativity, creative intelligence, tapping into my own inner wisdom, because I think for a lot of time and a lot of my life, I was operating out here in what I ought to do rather than operating in here in what truly drove me, and coming from an intrinsic motivation and intrinsically driven place. So that was where the lens came in, is being able to be able to move forward in a way that feels really aligned to my inner self rather than what everybody was telling me that I ought to do.
Yeah, I love we were talking about this the other week, and I think, especially in the modern workplace, in a lot of how people become successful, men and women, they almost have to bow to this kind of structure, linear, very kind of specific pathway, what everyone thinks they should do. And, even just the difference between men and women is that I see so many women as so intelligently creative, so like I would say wonky, weird, and able to think differently, and men too, but specifically with so many women I've seen in the past, and they're in workplaces where it's like a prison. That is like a prison for them. They have to almost forget all of that side and push it down and hold it back, and it becomes a very thing that they're struggling with. Like, can you talk to that for a second?
Yeah, I think that
Yes, I can. Yeah.
I've been there. So I think that I love the analogy of, if we're here moving through life, the way that we've been thinking is almost this box. It's very linear, it keeps going, and we're moving forward. And you get to a certain point where that box feels like it's closing in on you. And that's the feeling of being stuck, of feeling disoriented, unruddered, and not a rudderless, and just not knowing where you're going. And as that closes in, you start to realize, or maybe with what I'd like to bring awareness to, is that the way that you've been operating, or your operating system, is no longer working, because there's nothing internally to tether to. There's nothing that brings you back to a place of what do I really want? How do I walk through the world? How does this feel free to me? How does this feel like it's actually aligned? And we just keep going in circles. And that ability to open that box up, get rid of that box altogether, is the process of moving towards a more right hemisphere way of thinking, a more creative intelligence, tapping into visualization, tapping into ideas of what could be possible when you feel stuck and feel like you're in the unknown. So being able to draw upon tools and tactics that allow you to move into that space is something that I love to teach women. I love to work with women on, because it becomes more true to them. It brings them home. I like to feel like it brings them more home to themselves. And it's not, not another productivity hack, not another tool that I'm throwing in them. It's using a framework to help them tap into their own inner wisdom and intelligence that brings them home to themselves and aligns with what they really want. And they're able to see that when they can stop moving in that linear, logical, fear-based mentality and move into an openness of permission. Give yourself permission to dream. Give yourself
Yeah,
permission to follow that.
I can almost see it as like the high performing woman who's got to where she is by following a recipe, following a pathway in a career, or following a number of steps that she has to take. It feels very structured. And the very thing that's got her to be successful is now the thing that's not making her feel successful. She can't solve problems like she used to. She might feel like she's got even problems in her own life that she hasn't got a creative way of breaking through them. And I think I've seen that definitely in the past. But what happened for you? Because honestly, I think you touched on this before. You almost had like a past life and re-engaging, like you said, with the painting, and what started to happen as you started to do that for yourself? What was the turning point for you?
The turning point for me, so my past life and the path that I followed was very much one that was expected of me. One that, my mom was an immigrant, came to Canada. You're either going to be a doctor or a lawyer. My sister became a lawyer, and I was like, great, I'm going to be a doctor. So, took neuroscience, took biology, and went down this path without really checking in with myself. Is this something that I want to do? Fast forward, go down this route and go into a path of emergency response and public health. And I'm checking the boxes. Now I'm a manager. I have the office. I have the title on the door. Everything is great. And then we move countries across the world with my husband. We moved to Malaysia. And I am no longer in the workforce. I leave my career behind. And this is a career that I've fully attached my identity and my value to. And so when I no longer had this value or identity, I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I liked. I didn't know anything about myself. And I had a total meltdown. And so what allowed me to come back to understanding what I wanted, understanding the clarity, was starting to tap into these creative elements like painting, where it's allowed me to explore and just see the world broader. It wasn't the end of the world that I didn't have this job and this title and that I was checking the box. It was actually, okay, well, what does this mean in terms of possibility for me? And so that moment was a really big turning moment, because it allowed me to figure out what it is I want, starting to get into personal development, starting to understand the inner faculties that I needed to develop and see in awareness, which started the path down to becoming a coach. And really that was really the beginning point of me wanting to be a coach, by getting my own coaching, following creativity, and being able to see how I could learn to walk through life in a different way that was more internally driven than externally driven. And
Yeah.
that was the beginning point of it all.
Yeah, I can see in you. And I love this in coaching and watching people who become phenomenal coaches like yourself, is that you often need an abundance what other people are seeking to bring out in themselves. And if I was somebody who had been just following this pathway, felt really structured, felt my whole life was void of creativity and play, and I would definitely connect with Karen. By the way, this is a full endorsement, by the way, and because I think that, like, even as we were talking about what you're creating, Karen actually brought some kind of copy to the table. She said, "Oh, this is me," and it sounded so like non-creative, and I was like, "You're banned from that kind of expression," because like Karen is the most like the way that Karen expresses life and things, that's like, it absolutely, it's literally a level above. And I think that when you you have somebody in your life like yourself to model for, indulging in creativity, using play. I know now you're showing your art. I think it really does provide someone with a North Star. I think you recently showed your art for. Is it the first time in a while, or is it the first time ever? Tell us more about that.
I've been about five. Well, what started in Malaysia, where I, bought an easel, picked up the paintbrush, started to create art. That really sparked, as I said, this big spark in me that couldn't be dimmed, and I needed to continue to follow that path. And so I have been following my creative voice and being able to paint. And just showed in an exhibit last week, which was fabulous, to be able to talk creativity and connect and meet all sorts of different people. And that will continue. That will never not be a part of my life now that I've seen what creativity can bring to all aspects of my life. And what I mean by that is this back to that lens of walking through the world. It's how I talk to my kids. It's how I interact with my husband. It's how I interact with our clients. It's a way of coming with curiosity. It's a way of, is there a different way or a different approach that we can think about this? Is there have you thought about it in this completely on its head way? And I think thinking about things and walking through the world, not following the norm or that, lemming's path, allows innovation. It allows freedom. Like I continuously have this vision of, my life before just really felt boxed in and felt like it was closing in on me. And when I open up to possibilities and I try to experiment and play and be more in tune with how I feel through something, and how I walk through the world, it feels like anything is possible. And when you think that anything is possible for yourself, you're a different person when you interact with your family, your friends, your colleagues, your clients. And that is a lens that I want to continue to move through the world, and I want to help others move to that lens, because what better feeling than being able to feel free?
Yeah, and you actually said this when we were talking before, is that you said there's a hidden problem with so many professional women. Like, do you want to talk about that hidden problem?
Yeah, I think we've been taught for so long, and I think society has leaned too far heavily now on all of these really linear and structural ways. Well, you go to school and you get A's, and then you go to university, and then you get the job, and then it's a manager and a director and an exec, and it's almost like this preordained pathway. And this is part of what we've been taught as the norm, and we haven't been taught to question it, or we just follow along almost blindly. And this is what really causes the problem of us feeling like this is like a sweater, like a wool sweater that's gone in the wash, and now we're wearing it and it's itchy and it's too tight and it doesn't fit. And it doesn't fit because it doesn't feel aligned. And so being able to move towards pause, being able to stay still enough to pause and say, okay, is this even right for me? And then recognizing that it's not, being able to then move over to, okay, well, what would feel right and how could I operate in a way that's different, is the process that allows women to get out of that. And a lot of my friends, a lot of the clients that I coach, it's where I find them and where I meet them is usually at a place where they don't see another way. They've only known this one way. They've only operated in this one way. But the prevailing feeling is either this isn't right for me anymore. Like I've made it. I've done all the things that I've wanted to do. I have the office. I have, the name on the door, but I don't want this life. So that's one woman I see. Another woman that I see is just wanting something different. You've done all the things and your life has changed. Like, we're not meant to be these linear paths. They're meant to be circuitous, and they're meant to change. And then you have to adapt to that, but not knowing the tools or the way of how do you adapt. Some women want to spend more time with their family. Some women just want to carve out more space for themselves. They don't want this track anymore, but it's hard to know the how. And I think the third type of woman that I work with, and I will say, full disclosure, I've been all three. I have been all in all
Absolutely,
three
you
of
have to
these
be. Yeah,
places.
you have to have walked the path. Yeah, yeah.
is the woman who knows that there's something more, but feels like she's playing small because this really logical A, B, and C way of being doesn't allow that next step of possibility or those big, quantum jumps or those big new ways of being to prosper and to be able to break through that. So it's that type of seasons that I find women in that I really like to work with because one, I've been all of them. And two, there's a clear way to get out of that if we just shift the frame and shift the lens that they've been operating in.
Yeah, I love that. You gave me this the most visceral. I think that's the most visceral metaphor I've ever experienced of a woolen jumper that has been shrunk in the wash and now feels itchy and too small. I was like, actually physically feel that, and I was like, yeah, I actually felt like my life's been like that at some point. So I'm like, yeah, I was like that with my gym. I was like, this just doesn't fit anymore. It's annoying and it's
Yeah,
frustrating. So
get this
yeah,
off of me.
yeah. Wow. And yeah, I can just really see that. And I actually, what it brought up for me as you were talking about that final woman is, I actually worked with an ops director, and she was wanting to be the CEO of the company, and she went for the position of wanting to be the CEO, and she was refused, and she was so distraught because she had been preparing for this for a long time, and they just said to her like straight up, you're just too you can't think creatively. You're very good at following instructions, but you can't think creatively. And that's why she came into coaching. She was like, okay, I really need to work on just not being so rigid. Her actual expression was like, I feel so rigid, I feel so like set in my ways. And in a bit of discovery, we just found that she just had nothing that she did was expressive. Nothing she did
Yeah.
was joy or play, and she sacrificed all that to be in her position. So it was like really interesting, and it's funny. It's like most women will just work harder at being, in that prison, when actually it's quite, when you, as you explain it, the actual work they need to do is go get creative.
Go get creative. That's a great point that you bring up because I also find that because we've been programmed for so long to think in this linear path, that we often feel like the solution is more. But that's the opposite of what women need. We don't need more responsibility and more work and more this and more this. It's actually letting go. It's the opposite of it. It's letting go of a way of being, letting go of things that aren't serving us anymore, letting go of holding the wheel, so white knuckling the wheel and saying, okay, this isn't working anymore. How can I let go of those thoughts or behaviors or habits and move into a place that feels more ease and that comes more naturally, and or maybe not as naturally at first, but that's the work. That is the work, is being able to move in these more uncomfortable ways at first to get to something that is more true to who you are. But it's not always about more. And I think the other big thing that comes up when you're saying that is sometimes the misnomer is, well, I'm in that shrunken sweater. I'm in that, woolly sweater that's itchy, but I don't want to blow up my whole life to do this. And it doesn't necessarily need to be a whole blow up your whole life to do this, but it is, how do we make changes and how do we work through finding something that feels more aligned by letting go of some things, by getting really clear on what it is you do want, and then breaking through some of the fear that comes up or creeps up through this creative intelligence and this creative way of thinking.
Yeah, it's actually amazing how much or how differently somebody can think just by doing something that's a bit left field. Let's call it
Yes.
right field, like right field. Right field a bit in this left field in the
Yes.
expression. And I remember just taking, doing experiential learning with clients, like just taking them doing something they've never done them before, or something they've rekindled, or something that they've kind of put down and never picked back up. When they redo that, it just brings out so many ways of thinking, and they solve problems themselves. And that's what I think I love about that kind of work, is that you think it's going to be more strategy and more hustle and
Yeah.
more, hard work. And actually, when you do it the way that you do it, it allows someone to kind of really get to the point where they'll come to a really powerful conclusion without that kind of like hard work, if you wish. So you actually, you shared that you've built a framework to help guide someone through this. Talk about that for a second, Coraz. I think that's really powerful as well.
Yeah. So when I went through these moments of change over the last 10 years or so, these really pivotal moments, I was able to look back and see, okay, what was the connecting thread that allowed me to fully change and move through it and get to the other side of it? And this framework emerged that was really straightforward but powerful. I call it the 4C framework, and it's about getting really clear on what you want to do, being courageous, and being able to walk to break down some of the fear that comes up, some of the gremlins that come up in terms of self-doubt, being able to be consistent, because you're never going to be great at doing one thing once. It's like, how do you consistently move forward in that direction? And then how do you do that in a supportive environment with community coaching or people who are in your corner helping you stay accountable and helping ask those questions to keep you moving on your path from A to B. So through this framework, we are able to move women through this framework to that next step that they want to go to, whether that's wanting to be that CEO, like in the example you gave, Ben, or whether that's being able to get more space so they can spend more time with clients, or maybe it's, being able to speak on stage, whatever it is that there's the goal that feels more aligned, it's moving through this framework. And it's doing it by using creative faculties and being able to probe on those. And I'll give you a really small example of that is I was working through this framework with a client, and she had this vision or this goal of being able to talk on stage. And that was something that was on her heart and wanted to do. But, that was the clarity that came out. But then the courage, we went through this exercise of, okay, well, can you name the courage? And like, what is the fear that comes up when you think about that? It's like, oh no, like immediately, like, no one's going to be there. People are going to laugh. I'm not going to know what to say. All of these things came up. And so we went through an exercise of, okay, those feelings are coming up. Just park those there for a second. But now imagine and visualize that, you've delivered your speech, you're at the end of this, and what feelings come up and what does that look like if it were possible and you've delivered it to the best of your ability and it worked out so perfectly. And you have the client, the individual, walk through that visually. Okay, so being able to really sit in that, feel in that, what does that look like that I've done? And what came out was when she told me what happened through that experience is she had this moment where she said the visual image that came up was her on the top of the mountain, like Maria on The Sound of Music, and so she was dancing and it was this energetic shift of moving from, oh, well, no, that's very scary and I can't speak on stage because of X, Y, and Z, to if I can actually visualize myself and the emotion that brings and the feeling that brings when I'm doing it, that pushes me further towards moving through that because I can see myself doing it, I can visualize, and I can connect with a feeling of elation, having done something that has been on my heart. So it's these different ways of thinking that we're not used to thinking through and being in that space that really provides those powerful shifts for women. And then that's something that they can then easily pull on. Okay, how can I do a small visualization exercise before I go into that boardroom, before I do this, that will help me get out of my fear state and into my powerful state that is more emotional, that is more right brain thinking, emotional and intrinsic sentiments.
Yeah, it's so interesting. You said there is that it's kind of like those moments where you really need to buy on a tool, like you need to borrow a tool and like have that in your, because I still get nervous going on the stage. Like I still get nervous, and actually like having like I've got my own set of tools, and I think the key thing you said there is like we don't naturally have these unless they were modeled to us by parents that were like that's so rare, and like it's almost like when we get into a position of leadership or we're promoted into a position, we then have to speak in front of 10 employees, 100 employees. And it's like, I haven't got that set of tools to do this. Right. And then all of a sudden you feel unconfident. You feel like you're that you're incompetent, that you haven't got the
Yeah.
right toolbox, and then you give yourself a hard time. And actually, if you're a sports performer, as you go up the leagues or as you're competing against higher level performers, you do have to up level your skill set. And so it's funny how sometimes we don't think like this as professionals. It's like, oh, I've got way more demands on me now. So
It's true. And you
yeah.
even think about the paradigm of, I find women too with decision making. Like if they fall into that third archetype of like, I don't know if I can get into that leadership position because, I want it, but I can't make decisions. And it comes down to not knowing how to tune into their gut. Everybody says, well, follow your gut. What's your intuition saying? And a lot of women are like, I don't know. I've been following this script and this like checking this box. So being able to make decisions and decision making directly related to leadership positions and being in a leadership position is a barrier women find as a barrier. But once you have an attune, like a tuning fork, that fine-tuned skill to knowing like, no, I can trust my gut, I can trust myself, I know the answers, and being able to gain that confidence in that skill is something that is invaluable. Like you can take that anywhere, and not only in your leadership skills, but in your own confidence in yourself. And I think it's just coming back to, we aren't taught these things. These aren't things that, you go to school and you learn about. It's okay, well, can you do the math and can you do the trigonometry and can you do these things? But then how do you learn and how do you grow and build capacities in these more intangible but necessary to operate, and I actually think uniquely positioned to operate world, in the world of AI, where you put anything in Chat GPT and there you can get it. But really, that's not a skill of creativity or a skill of inner knowing or a skill of innovation. Like these are the things that we need, and these are the things that we need more than ever right now. Women need more than ever right now.
Yeah, I was actually thinking of you today, actually, because I was talking to Robert about innovation and like becoming not needed. Like so many coaches, so many people in work are going to be replaced by AI. But something we did talk about was something that will not be replaced as creative thinkers, people that can pull together big pieces of of big groups of people or big parts of the organization and think and synthesize and be creative. So I think if you're listening to this podcast, it's a skill that you absolutely need to invest in. And even as you were talking through that visualization, I was like thinking, hang on a second, like you're not going to be very good at visualizing if you're not used to using your right side of your brain. It's kind of like, it's more of like, and especially women that report, oh, I can't see what's my future looking like, I can't visualize what it's going to look like. Well, it's just it's practice, and that's what Karen can really help you with. So what I'd love for you to do is kind of summarize, Karen, and share where people can find you if they are looking to do this work. If this has resonated with them and they just want to reach out to you, what would be like the best place they can go to find out more about what you're doing?
Love that. Yeah. I'm on LinkedIn, so come and say hello. Karen Bramhill. You can also find me at Karma Dharma. That's the organization that I do this work through. I would love to be able to help grow and nurture and build this creative intelligence within you, because I think maybe the last thing I'll say about this is something within you. This is something within everyone. This is not a new thing you need to like buy or get. This is something that already exists, and it's simply tapping into that so that it can bloom and grow and be nurtured. And that's exciting. That's exciting that it's already there. It's already waiting to come out. And so I would love for you to get in touch and love to have a conversation from there.
Yeah. Also, just like I think you should add Karen on LinkedIn, just because your posts are the most refreshing things I see on there. It's just like there's like so much energy, there's so much vibrancy, and I think it's a great model for so many people that are looking to show that side of themselves. Karen, thank you so much for this conversation. I'll put all the stuff, all the links and stuff like that in the podcast notes. Thank you so much for listening. Subscribe to the podcast, and also if you need to drop me a message at any point, everything you need is in the podcast notes. Take care.
Thanks a lot.